What's up, guys? Welcome into a Week 9 edition of Chargers Weekly as the Bolts head east to take on the Eagles. Our guy, Matt Money Smith, out this week. Look forward to getting him back next Thursday. Coming up on the show, a pair of athletic beat writers. We'll get this week's opposing view from Zach Berman. But first, Daniel Popper and I will break down this matchup as the Chargers look to improve to 5-3 on the season. All right, let's bring him in. Daniel Popper, The Athletic. And Pop, let's start with the Patriots game and really the last three games in terms of time of possession has been the one thing that's kind of stuck out to me. Like this defense playing 35, 36 minutes of defense. They got to find a way to maybe get back to running the football a little bit more, controlling the clock, and hopefully that results in some wins starting this Sunday.
Yeah, I think you bring up a fantastic point that I really haven't dove into yet, but it's been an issue here. And you wonder, is it a strategy from opposing offenses? Like, is this becoming a formula, right? The Chargers have had a struggling run defense. So opposing teams are like, okay, this is somewhere where we can attack. And there's a byproduct of that, which is keeping the ball out of Justin Herbert's hands. And I think to a degree, it is a formula that some opposing coaches, smart opposing coaches, are trying to attack. And I think the other factor in this is that other teams are running the ball well and holding on to the ball, but the Chargers aren't sustaining possessions at the same time. And I think what has to improve here is the Chargers just need to be better in early down situations to set themselves up with easier third downs. In that Patriots game, they averaged 8 yards per third down. And if you're more efficient on early downs, you're going to be more successful on third downs because you're going to have easier third downs and you're going to be able to improve that time of possession. But it's a factor right now. And you talk about that Patriots game specifically, the Patriots were able to hold on to the ball for so long that final possession there when they were up a touchdown driving, the Chargers defense just didn't have the juice there to get the stop they needed because they were tired. So I think you bring up a fantastic point. It's something that has to improve for this defense to perform better. And it's in the offense's hands here, like be better on early downs and sustain possessions. And that's how you can improve that time of possession situation that's absolutely affecting games over the last two games for sure.
You know, we saw the run D improve a bit with Justin Jones in there. Obviously, Drew Tranquil's back. We'll see the status of Kenneth Murray when he comes back. But then, you know, the starting corner situation. I mean, what do you make of the kind of the state of the defense going into this game against the Eagles?
Yeah, you finally get Justin Jones back. You get Drew back, and you see some improvements with the run defense. And then you lose two starting corners in Asante Samuel Jr. and Michael Davis. It's almost like you finally got your head above water and another issue pops up and you sink below the water again. But we'll see. I mean, guys have to step up. I think Devon Campbell has been solid this season at times. He's certainly a more improved player this year than he was last year, more consistent in coverage. And he definitely looks like a pro player at this point. You see some slip ups at times, but in that Patriots game, when he came in, they tried to go right at him. It was pretty obvious that message was relayed to Mac Jones, like go attack 20, and he held up there. So the bigger concern for me would be Ryan Smith. Hasn't really been relied on as a defensive player in his career, has been more of a special teams player, but this is an opportunity for him. And when the Chargers went out and signed him in free agency, one of the attractive things about the Chargers was, hey, listen, we think you can play some defense. We think you can be more than just a special teams ace. So that has been in the plans, and now this is his opportunity to go do it. But it's never a good thing when you're down two corners. But the thing I will say is the Chargers have a fantastic pass defense. They're in the top 5 in passing defense DVOA. It's been a strength of this team. Some of that is personnel, but some of it too is the coverage schemes that Brandon Staley is developing. It's where he starts his game plans every single week. So you know that they're going to come out in this game on Sunday against Jalen Hurts and the Philly offense with a really sound coverage plan. And it's up to Ryan Smith and Devon Campbell to show up, to step up and to be difference makers there at cornerback.
Popper, I think what's fascinating about this matchup is that Eagles fans and everybody's yelling at the Eagles coaching staff to run the ball more. You're not running the ball at all. And all of a sudden, okay, fine. 236 yards against the Lions. I think they ran the ball 46 times. Do you think they may have found something in the running game? And how do you think that kind of correlates with this upcoming matchup against the Chargers, who have had struggles stopping the run?
Yeah. Well, when you look at the Eagles, you think, okay, this should be a good running football team, and they should really lean into that strength. They got a really good offensive line, and they have a quarterback in Jalen Hurts who can run the zone read quarterback keeper game at a high level. That's a strength of sort of his game as well. So they're a top 5 rushing offense according to DVOA, Football Outsiders efficiency metric, for those who don't know what I'm talking about. So it would make sense for them to lean into that against the Chargers. Now I know they took a step forward last week against the Patriots. They showed up and played some solid run defense, but we also saw them take a step forward in that Raiders game. And that was obviously without Justin Jones, but we all thought, okay, maybe this is them sort of putting it together and finding that groove in terms of stopping the run. And then they took 2 steps back over the next 2 games against the Browns and Ravens. So was this an aberration again, or is this really them taking a step forward and finally solving these issues? I think this will be a great test against the Eagles to sort of see, okay, is this the real Chargers run defense, or was that Patriots game just another aberration for a run defense that really still right now statistically is the worst in the league?
Popper, does this season feel like long to you? Like, I know it's just an extra week, but for some reason it feels like it's 4 extra weeks. I mean, I don't know what it is. I can put my finger on it. It just feels so long.
Yeah, well, I think for me, as somebody who's never really covered meaningful November football games, that's why it feels long, is because we're in the 8th game of the season and I'm still like looking at the playoff picture, which is something that I've never done in my 7 seasons covering the NFL. It's certainly more fun to be covering November games, but for me, it's like, oh, wow, this is what the actual NFL season looks like. You're covering meaningful games all the way through Thanksgiving and even to Christmas and even the New Year if you're really covering a good team. So I'm enjoying it. I think it's fantastic. And that was really, the benchmark I was looking for from this team heading into the season. Like, can they play meaningful games late into November and December? And they're on that track right now. And despite the fact that they've lost a couple games in a row, I think the coaching staff deserves a lot of credit for putting this team in that position.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to get lost in the fact that all 32 teams are going to face some sort of adversity throughout the course of now a 17-game season. And this is kind of the first bout of adversity, losing to 2 quality teams in the Ravens, in the Patriots. How do you view this game on Sunday? If you win, you're 5-3, you're right back in the mix in the AFC West, and there's so much more football in front of you. I think what I sense is the players are pretty focused and not, you don't get too high or too low after these wins and losses, especially the last 2 to 2 quality opponents.
Yeah, you don't want to call it a must win, but you feel like if the Chargers are going to be postseason contenders and to make a push for the playoffs, they have to beat this team because the Eagles are not a good team. So if you really consider yourself a good football team, this is where the bleeding has to stop. You got to go into Philly. I know it's on the road. I know it's in a tough environment, but you got to go in there and you got to win this football game because you've gone up against 2 excellent head coaches, 2 of the best in the league, and Bill Belichick and John Harbaugh. You've gone to get up against 2 great defensive minds in Belichick and defensive coordinator Wink Martindale there in Baltimore. So you can write that off. Okay, you've gone up against great coaching staffs. You've gone up against defensive coordinators that are going to make things really difficult on Justin Herbert. But this is a young coaching staff in Philadelphia. Nick Sirianni, obviously Chargers fans are very familiar with him, but the excuses of, okay, you're facing great organizations, you're facing great coaches kind of stops at that point because there are a lot of question marks right now about, what Nick Sirianni is. He has a lot to prove as a head coach. So this is a game and the talent difference between the 2 rosters starting at the quarterback position is really apparent. So on paper, this is a game the Chargers have to win. If you go into Philly and you lose at 4-4 with some tough games coming up, including a bunch in the division, then you start, asking questions about, were those 5 games, really an illusion, to use a Brandon Staley term. So I think this is a really big game. If you're going to contend for the postseason, you got to beat teams that you are expected to beat. And this is one of those games for the Chargers. And this is their opportunity to reset this season and get it back on the tracks.
Yeah, a couple more for you. It's a young coaching staff, but obviously Shane Steichen knows this offensive personnel really, really well. Nick Sirianni literally coached Keenan Allen. Do you think that's, I always feel like that sometimes it's overblown when, you say, hey, do you have an advantage because you know these guys so well? But in the case of Shane, knowing the offensive personnel, what do you think he can share, or do you think it even matters?
Yeah, well, I think we had the same conversation about Gus Bradley when the Chargers faced off with the Raiders.
Right?
That didn't have a huge impact. I mean, it's not a negative thing to have familiarity with the personnel, but I think the way that the Chargers are using their personnel this season is so different than what they were doing last season that schematically, game plan wise, I don't know if it's going to have a huge impact. It'll certainly be a nice pregame moment for Shane Steichen to say hello to Justin Herbert and Easton Stick and Mike Williams and Keenan Allen and everybody. But yeah, I mean, interesting. When I interviewed Keenan in training camp, he brought up Nick Sirianni unprompted, just as a massive influence on him early in his career in terms of sort of, becoming the receiver that he did, because it took Keenan some time to sort of cement himself as one of the game's best receivers. And just in terms of his route running, his football intelligence, a lot of that he puts on the shoulders of Nick Sirianni, who is obviously the wide receivers coach with the Chargers back when Keenan was drafted in 2013. So I don't know if it will have a massive impact on schematics and game plan, but never a negative thing to have some familiarity with the opposing personnel, especially the opposing quarterback. And Shane Steichen certainly has that familiarity with Justin Herbert.
All right, Pop, if you had to point to one thing, what's the key to the game for the Chargers to get win number 5 and kind of get out of this little rut they're in?
Yeah, the offense has to reset and find itself and get back to what it was in those first 5 games. And like we were talking about earlier, a big part of that is just finding that early down efficiency and being more effective on those downs. Good quarterbacks have been surgical against this Eagles defense so far this season. They play a ton of zone. Just looking into the numbers this week, they actually play the least amount of man-to-man of any defense in the league. It's a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 2 zone. And they're going to do similar stuff in the sense that Jonathan Gannon and Brandon Staley are cut from the same cloth, and they both believe in a lot of disguise and rotations post-snap. But for Justin Herbert, it's going to be what he talked about after the game. Can he be patient? Can he be disciplined? And can he move on to that check down and just take what the defense is giving him and matriculate the ball down the field? It's going to be another one of those games. And it's going to be those games moving forward for the rest of his career, as long as until he proves that he can do it. And so, in early downs, especially when they're passing, finding the check down, being patient, and sort of moving the ball down the field chunk by chunk without those big plays over the top that Justin Herbert has become accustomed to. But this is a get right game. Derek Carr completed 31 of 34 passes against this team. He was surgical. It wasn't a lot of stuff over the top. They hit some big plays, but for the most part, it was Derek Carr taking what the defense was giving him and being that veteran quarterback who's willing to check the ball down. Justin Herbert has to be that in this game because that's what's going to be available to him. Can he do that, particularly on early downs, to sort of let this offense find itself again? Because that's the big concern right now.
Yeah, and then pick your spots to get the ball to 81. I think it's no coincidence. It's the fact that he hasn't had those performances that we're used to seeing at the beginning of the year. These last 2 games resulted in Chargers losses. So if 81 can get involved too, I think that's a big key as well.
Yeah, definitely. And they've tried to get him the ball. He's just hasn't been able to make the plays. There was a deep ball in the Ravens game that he could have made a play on where it kind of slowed down.
That was early. That was early in the game. That could have kind of changed the trajectory of that.
Yep. There was a 4th down play on a quick comeback route that Justin threw him that I thought Mike could have come down with, went off his hands. There's a 3rd down play against the Patriots where he should have made that catch over the middle, got hit and dropped it. So they're still trying to get him the ball. We don't know how serious that knee thing he's dealing with is. But there's plays to be made for Mike Williams. I think it comes down to all the receivers. This doesn't just fall on Justin Herbert, right? I don't think he's playing his best football, but the protection has broken down. His receivers aren't making plays. Jared Cook had a couple drops in that Ravens game. Mike Williams has had some drops. Keenan Allen has had some drops. So I think it's about the players around Justin Herbert stepping up, including that offensive line, and then Justin himself, also taking that next step as well. It's a collective effort here offensively.
It's crazy. It's the 3rd trip to the East Coast in the first 9 weeks for the Chargers.
Maybe that's why it feels so long.
That may be the case, dude. Hey, man, always appreciate your time. Awesome stuff as always, and we'll see you in Philly.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
All right, guys, before we get to Zach Berman, a quick note to let you know that Pepsi, they're passing out the ultimate Chargers fan experience. Rush in, scan the code to enter for a chance to win some awesome prizes. Bolt up with Pepsi. No purchase necessary, must be 18 years or older. Sponsor PepsiCo. For official rules, visit boltupla.com/711. All right, to get this week's opposing view from Philadelphia, let's bring in Zach Berman of The Athletic. And Zach, let's just start with this. What are the Eagles saying about the Chargers coming to the East Coast?
Well, there's obviously a lot of respect for Justin Herbert, a lot of respect for Joey Bosa. It's a team that the Eagles don't see quite often, right? The last time they saw him was in 2017 out in LA. So there's some unfamiliarity. Now, there is familiarity with the coaching staffs. Jonathan Gannon, the Eagles defensive coordinator, is a close friend with Chargers coach Brandon Staley. So there's background there, but overall, it's a fresh opponent. It's not like seeing the Giants or the Cowboys or Washington.
Zach, I was at SoFi Stadium on Sunday, just looking at the scores, doing the red zone updates, and I see this 44-6 final in Detroit, and I had to do a double take because of the rushing yards. 236 rushing yards. I think it was like 46 attempts. Philly had not run the ball at all. Like, what changed over the course of just a week? Was it just the opponent and the opponents coming up, or do you think they found something?
Yeah, a little bit of everything there. I do think that it was the opponent. It was they saw some things against the Lions. I think it was the way that the team had been playing, the way that the passing game had been going, frankly. The offensive line was really winning at the point of attack against the Lions, and it was working early. And when it was working early, I think they stuck with it. They had been in a few games this year where just because of the game situation, it had gotten out of hand, or they were playing from behind and they needed the pass to catch up. I think that when it was working early and they took a lead and it continued working, and especially when you saw those fourth quarter numbers, that the overall numbers had a lot to do with them running in the fourth quarter. But it is true, second and third quarters they were ahead and they were running the ball, and that was the key.
With Jalen Hurts, I almost feel like it makes him a better quarterback because of his threat to run as well. When you have a potent rushing attack, in what ways do you think Jalen just looks better when he has a running game?
Yeah, you hit it on the head there. I think first off, it's complementary to Jalen because he is such a good runner, and I think they can blend with each other. The fact that you run the ball, the fact that Jalen can run it, and what that does to the opposing defense's linebackers and their reads. I think that has a definite factor. The other part is, if I'm being completely honest, Jalen Hurts hasn't been the most efficient quarterback this year. And if you're not dropping back to throw it 40 times a game or 30, 35 times a game, then I think it plays into Jalen's hands, and he can be more efficient, and the play action can get working. And he can get on the move. I don't think the way to maximize Jalen Hurts at this stage of his career, at least, is to have him drop back, 30, 40 times a game. And so I do think the running offense, or running more than they have, it benefits the quarterback. That said, I don't think it's the way they want to play, and it's certainly not the way they want to play long term.
So, the Chargers start 4-1. Last two games against the Ravens and Patriots, offense just was a little bit out of sync. Time of possession was so lopsided. But if you look at the entire body of work, what do you think the biggest challenges the offense of the Chargers present to the Eagles defense with Justin and Keenan and Mike Williams and Austin Eckler coming out of the backfield?
Yeah, so obviously it always starts with the quarterback, right? And what Justin Herbert is able to do in a year and a half here, that will catch anyone's respect, and certainly he has it from the Eagles. You mentioned those other players, Nick Sirianni, a former Chargers coach, right? A former Chargers assistant. He has spoken quite a bit since he was hired about Keenan Allen, who he coached, about Austin Eckler, players who he saw their development. So I think they recognize the weapons there, the way Mike Williams has developed as well. So that's going to be a major challenge for the Eagles. Now, when the Eagles defense is at its best, they're winning at the line of scrimmage. And if they can get past that Chargers offensive line, they have guys who can get to the quarterback. Javon Hargrave has 6 sacks. Fletcher Cox is a perennial Pro Bowler. Josh Sweat can get around the edge. So they have guys who can get to the quarterback. And so I think when you look at Herbert, you look at the skill players, that's a mismatch for the Chargers, in my opinion. But if the Eagles can handle themselves at the line of scrimmage, that can tend to neutralize it.
I think it's fascinating the fact that Nick Sirianni, he literally coached Keenan Allen. Yeah. Shane Steichen literally coached Justin Herbert. Do you sense that there's an added significance for these guys playing the Chargers on Sunday?
It's a good question. Shane Steichen didn't own up to that, right? So I don't want to put words in his mouth there. For Sirianni, it's been far enough removed that I don't think there's that type of added significance. I think that he has a lot of fondness for his time there, right? That's when he linked up with Frank Reich. He takes a lot of pride in the wide receivers that he helped develop there. So I don't think there's any kind of ill will or animosity or anything like that. I think that there are matchups against the team that might have fired you, or against a player who was traded elsewhere where there's that added significance. I don't get the sense that's the case here. Now, Steichen's case, perhaps it's different, but he hasn't said that, and so I don't want to put words in his mouth there.
Yeah, and not in an ill will way, but just the fact that he coached a lot of these guys last year, so I'm sure it's going to be really neat for him to kind of see Justin and some of these guys that he was so close to. Speaking of Shane, what's it been like working with him in Philly, and as he kind of comes into his own as a coordinator with the Eagles?
Yeah, so it's a little different situation than what he had with the Chargers, because he has a head coach who calls the plays, right? And I was going to say an offensive head coach, but Anthony Lynn was an offensive head coach too. But Shane Steichen, from what I understand, was the play caller with the Chargers. He's not the play caller here with the Eagles. That's Nick Sirianni. So when you have an offensive coordinator who is not calling the plays, it tends to be a different type of job. And so as far as him coming into his own, I don't know about that. I would say he's been a big part of them installing this offense. And what Sirianni wanted to do was take different ideas that maybe Shane had from the time they split apart, from when Nick went to Indianapolis and then Shane took a bigger role with the Chargers. So and kind of meld them together. So he has been influential in terms of installing the offense. But if we're being completely honest, and I think Chargers fans can appreciate this, right? This is a coaching staff that has had a lot of exposure to Philip Rivers, right? And Philip Rivers is and you know this better than me, but from the way it's been described, it's like having a coach in the room, right? And so now you're working with a young quarterback room. You're working with a different style quarterback than Philip Rivers. So they've had to adjust their offense based on that.
Yeah, no question. I look at this Eagles team this year, Zach, and you have the pulse of the fans there. On one hand, you're like, all right, well, we got all these draft picks. Are you pushing everything to 2022? The other hand, you're a game out of the last spot in the NFC, and you have a young coaching staff, and it seems like momentum is building a little bit. What are Eagles fans thinking? Where are their heads at right now in the middle of the year?
Yeah, I think Eagles fans are probably thinking more long-term than short-term, right? You want to win every game, and when they lose, it's like the sky's falling in Philadelphia, and that's the case every year. Yeah. That said, I think there's really a learning period for the fans and for Nick Sirianni, for Jalen Hurts, trying to kind of feel them out, figure out if these are the guys they're going to have going forward. And there's a recognition that they have those 3 first-round picks, or up to 3 first-round picks next season, and that this very much is a transition year. Now, that doesn't help them when, or I should say that doesn't help the team if they're losing by 10 and they're not running the ball and fans are upset at the stadium. The Eagles are winless at home this season, so you can imagine the way fans have taken that. But overall, I do think there is an understanding from the fan base that this is a transition year, and they're trying to figure out who the quarterback's going to be long term.
Defensively, the Chargers have Joey Bosa, who's been double and sometimes triple team this year. Derwin James. When you look at those two guys specifically, what challenges do they present to this Eagles offense, knowing that listen, you may try to run the football. I think really one of the keys, and I'll ask you as we close out, Zach, but I think one of the keys for the Chargers in this game is try to get up early and control the clock. They've been outpossessed. They've been playing almost 35, 36 minutes of defense the last 2 weeks. But if Darwin and Joey can kind of impose their will on this game, I think that's where the Chargers may get their 5th win.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a talent perspective, the Chargers certainly have the edge. I mean, I like this Chargers team. I like this Chargers roster. Good quarterbacks have done real well against this Eagles defense, right? They've played softer coverage. They played a lot of zone, and there have been quarterbacks who've picked that apart. And I think Justin Herbert has the ability to do so. You mentioned imposing the will on the defensive side, Bosa and James. I mean, obviously outstanding players. I think the big question is going to be, are the Eagles going to run the ball the way they did last week? Right. Because the Chargers defense from what I've watched, and you would know this better than me, they're inviting you to run, right? They want you to run so you don't have the big play on them. And are the Eagles going to take that, or are the Eagles going to try to throw the ball? I mean, if they're counting on Jalen Hurts to outplay Justin Herbert to win this game, I don't think that's going to work. I mean, I think what the Eagles would need to do is they would need to move the sticks on the ground. Have Jalen Hurts make the throws that are there. They're going to have to force a turnover like they did last. They're on defense. They need some turnover luck, and they need to win at the line of scrimmage. But if I'm just looking at it, I think the Chargers are the better team. It's just a matter of how they play the matchups.
Yeah, the running defense, and I think one of the chief issues with the Chargers was not having Justin Jones for a bulk of this first half of the season. They improved a little bit against the Patriots, but the Patriots still ran the ball 39 times. So, it's that fine line of putting the ball in your best player's hand in Justin Herbert, and also maybe having to sacrifice your defense being on the field for as long as they have, specifically the last 3 weeks. So if you had to point to one key to the game, you may have just alluded to it, but what do you think is going to decide this one, Zach?
Yeah, I always go back to the line of scrimmage, right? I think the Chargers are too good from a quarterback and skill position player perspective. That if the Eagles can't get pressure on Herbert, it's going to be a long day for the Eagles. So I think that for as much talk as there is about the Eagles running game and Jalen Hurts, to me, the question is going to be, can the Eagles get pressure on Herbert? If the Eagles can get pressure on Herbert, they can stay in the game. If they can't get to Herbert, the way they play defense in terms of their coverages, there are going to be open completions there for Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and you go on down the list. So I think, to me, that's going to be the key to the game is can the Eagles defensive line get pressure?
Zach Berman, The Athletic, you do awesome work, man. I look forward to seeing you in Philly this Sunday. And hey, these are fun matchups because we, like you said, we don't see them too often. So this unfamiliarity kind of breeds this kind of anticipation. So we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, I just wish it was in LA, right? I mean, it's like 40 degrees right now in Philly. I think about when the Eagles played the Chargers there last. The weather was perfect. The venue was perfect. So I just wish the game was out west.
I know, man. We'll get you out to SoFi sooner than later. I got to bring a coat, I guess, is
exactly.
What me.
I would recommend it. Yep.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for us. A big thanks to Zach Berman and Daniel Popper for joining me. And of course, thanks to you all for listening. Be sure to download and subscribe to the Chargers Podcast Network, wherever you listen to podcasts. And hey, episode 1 of Running for History drops Friday morning. It's a 6-part narrative series commemorating LaDainian Tomlinson's single-season touchdown record. You don't want to miss it. Enjoy the weekend as the Bolts look to improve to 5-3. And until next time, I'm Chris Hayre.